Okay, well, thanks very much, Bruce. We're so privileged to have you here. This is our cryptography students and cybersecurity students here. We have students online and
They're
also
a lot more than I expected.
yeah, we have big classes here. They're all here to see and hear from you. So we're very privileged, and there's still students arriving, which is good to see. Okay, well, the agenda is up to you, Bruce. You can do this however you want. I mean, I know typically you take questions from the chat. So if the students want to ask any questions, either put your hand up here and I'll give you the microphone.
So you should start. So what are you teaching? What do you think I should tell them?
Well, we teach Bob and Alice, of course. This is our special mug that we have.
I saw the mug. That's a nice looking mug.
Yeah, that's right. Well, our students do a little quiz at the end of their lectures, and whoever wins will win the mug. So we teach the basics of cryptography, public key encryption, symmetric key, and so on. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be teaching TLS, secure tunnels, we do digital signing, and so on. But we also cover network security. That's an important part of cybersecurity. So we're about 3 weeks from the end of the module. So we're really wrapping things up. And we have a nice coursework that we do, botnet detection using an intrusion detection system. So thanks, Bruce, for coming along. Is there anything that's on your mind today that's worrying you, that you have great thoughts on?
So I've been teaching a class at the Harvard Kennedy School on election security, which has been particularly interesting. And I think it is in some ways fascinating because it's a very unique security requirement that we tend not to have elsewhere. I mean, the first problem is that unlike a lot of the systems we try to secure, you may think of banking, is that it is anonymous. That we have a very strong requirement to separate the voter from the vote, which makes a lot of our auditing systems, a lot of our security measures, that they're just not applicable. Because you can't figure out how, you can't do forensics in the same way. You can't figure out what happened. You can't roll things back. And that is a very interesting security requirement. More importantly, that we need the vote to be anonymous, even if the voter doesn't want it to be. Right. So to prevent coercion and vote buying and a lot of those things, it has to be that even the voter can't prove they voted a certain way. Right. So that if there is some kind of vote buying, the buyer can never be assured the goods have been delivered. And that is an important security requirement, which makes it actually very interesting. And also that you can never is a big word, that you can't do it over. That very, very rarely does a court say you have to do the vote over. I mean, I think of one example in Australia is the only one I can think of, right? So whatever happens on election day is what happened. And that makes it a very difficult security problem to solve. One of the principles developed by Ron Rivest actually codified this, is the notion of software independence. Right? That you don't want a system where you're depending on the software for the accuracy of the election. So software can be used to speed things up, to make things go more efficiently, but in the end, there's always a paper to rely on, and that really means internet voting makes no sense. Blockchain voting makes no sense. All of those things that you might want to use in other examples, you can't use in voting. So we've been talking about that, and what are the correct systems. And right now the gold standard is optical scan voting, where you fill out a voter verifiable paper ballot, and then that is scanned to get a quick tally, but the paper provides the backup audit. And then at at the end, afterwards, there's something called a risk limiting audit, where you always audit the results, and the amount of audit you do depends on the victory margin. Right, the victory margin is large, then you don't need to audit a lot of ballots to ensure that your vote is correct. And if the margin is small, you need to audit more. And there we're concerned about who won and not, what the numbers were. So that's been interesting. It's been interesting a year. A lot of countries have elections, talk about election security.
I mean,
That's
obviously
what I've been thinking about.
the US is probably well ahead of the UK, and in the UK we're still very much paper-based.
Paper's bad. Remember, paper's good.
Yeah.
Like, very much paper-based is what we want. And US is mostly paper-based. There's still some places that don't use it, but that is changing. So we're getting better. What makes the US different than most other countries is the sheer number of things we vote on. I mean, I don't know if you in the UK understand what a US ballot is like. We could have 60 or 70 different contests that we are voting on a single ballot. I mean, that might be more things than you vote on in your life. Hey, but that is not unusual. And so that makes some of the systems you'll see, like the Indian voting system is a good example. It's a very simple, robust, reliable system at many tech levels. It just won't work in the US because our elections are so much more complicated. And that is a uniquely US requirement that is hard to make work. And that makes our elections even harder.
And without getting political, obviously Trump won the election, and I saw a lot of posts online that said that some of the votes were rigged and so on. I just wonder if it had went the other way, without being political, do you think there would have been problems in the US?
I mean, 100%. We learned that in 2020 that right the Trump supporters had lots of spurious claims the election was rigged. And the problem is those claims, as crackpotty as they were echoed, right? They were echoed by the media, they were echoed by Republican government officials. So it became something that was being talked about. I mean, I am seeing similar conspiracy theories. I get lots of emails, but like no one's taking them seriously, which is better, right? So, as far as we know, the election was free and fair, and CISA reported that there was no foreign interference worth talking about. So the election was good. So yeah, I am seeing conspiracy theories, but they're remaining crackpot conspiracy theories. Like none of them are rising to the level of we have to deal with them.
Good. And I think in your blog you talk about this location X that's set up by the Secret Service and that doesn't need a warrant. What do you know about that service?
I don't know what we're talking about. Is it what kind of service is it?
This is Locate X. I think you blogged about it the other day. Some sort of.
I don't even remember. It's interesting.
Yeah. No, it's
Oh,
okay.
are you thinking of are you think of there are any number of systems, the commercial systems to locate people, basically based on the fact that you're carrying a surveillance device in your pocket, and lots of different apps have access to the location data. Right? You as users have given apps permission, so that is bought and sold and consolidated. So there are any number of ways to get at it, and I think that article is about just government using one of them.
That's great. Yeah.
And not uncommon that government surveillance piggybacks on corporate surveillance.
Yeah. And in the module, we cover the hashing of passwords, and it has a long history of problems related to hashing. Can you maybe give us an overview of some of the problems that the hashing of passwords have given us?
Interesting. So Stuart Schechter wrote an essay recently that I blogged talking about that. One of the problems with that is it stopped us as security people from knowing how bad passwords were for a long time. And so passwords are hashed so that the sysadmins don't have access to them. but then we can't study them. And it really wasn't until these giant troves of stolen passwords were leaked online that researchers were able to learn, how normal people use passwords. So it's a requirement which would only make sense sometimes and not in others, but it became canon. It became the thing that you did. And then that was a barrier to research. We know a lot more about passwords and how they fail now than we did before. Uh, when we see passwords hashed in ways that are necessary, if you're transmitting them, doing them without salt, of course, is I think the major security failure, and we still see that a lot. That that you can't reverse a one-way hash, but if you know what the domain space looks like, you can build basically a table of hashes of all the answers and then compare with whatever you're testing. It's a way to break a hash function that doesn't require breaking a hash function. So adding random noise into whatever you're hashing, makes that impossible. That's easy best practice and not always done.
Yeah, and I think you talked on your blog about a new iOS 18 feature, which implements a before first unlock, which puts it back into that state if it hasn't been used for a few days, and then the device is rebooted. Do you think this is a good step forward?
I think it's a great step. It's funny, I was writing about that this morning, that should be published probably early next week, because someone did a reverse engineer. The feature's not really talked about by Apple, which is interesting. But someone reverse engineered it. And basically what it does is after 72 hours exactly of an iPhone, the modern iPhone, the iOS 18, not being used, it forces a shutdown. So that to turn it on again requires a more complicated step than the normal pulling it up in doing the face recognition and having it work. I think it's a great feature, right? It prevents against a bunch of real world criminal attacks. So an easy thing to do, but yes, they did it. There was a rumor that it had to do with whether it was connected to Wi-Fi or not. Turns out that's not true. It is solely based on time. And we are now we have the tech details, so probably Apple will talk about it more. But for a while, we just didn't know. And it was first noticed by police forces that had, phones they were trying to break into, and found that if they left them dormant for a while, that the phones reset. And it's funny, and I've done, and Steve Belvin and Bill Cheswick wrote one of the first internet security books in the 1990s, Firewalls and Internet Security. So, he has been around for a while, first at AT&T Bell Labs, and then after the breakup of AT&T, stayed with, I think, the Belcor research group, and then became a professor at Columbia, where he's done a lot of work in the intersection of law and computer security. So, we've worked together on a variety of things. So it was that retirement talk was really nice to hear.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a few questions coming in. So I'm concerned about modern ciphers used in blockchain industry and quantum resistant ones. Is it too soon to consider those secure? How much time should the community take before a cipher is considered secure?
Yeah, I saw that question. It's complicated, and it's not just blockchain. It's sort of any protocol that needs long-term security and that's relying on algorithms that are potentially vulnerable to a quantum computer. So there's a lot of moving parts and hypotheticals here, but we do know that at least theoretically, a large-scale quantum computer will be able to break the modern public key algorithms we use today. Now, we don't know if that's actually true, and we don't have a real working quantum computer. We have toy computers, but not real ones. So now this is a lot of maybes between now and that eventuality, but it is something that cryptographers are worried about. And NIST in the United States is running a post-quantum cryptography competition, trying to create standards for algorithms that secure against quantum computers. And this has been running for a few years, and now I think 3 algorithms have been approved by NIST. And yes, I mean, I'd like to see them used. More generally, algorithm agility is important in any system. I mean, not just against a quantum computer, but against any cryptanalysis breakthrough that might happen, by some smart mathematician. So making sure systems are able to adjust their algorithms if something happens. Now it depends on the system. I mean, if you think about I don't know, a system for text messaging security, that I mean, in that sense, that's easy. You just update it, and everything in the future uses the new algorithms. If something more complicated, like an auditing system, which a blockchain is one of them, you're concerned a lot about the past. So even if you update the algorithms, the things in the past were still secured by the old algorithms. So depending on what you're doing, you're more or less concerned about being proactive. Right? I mean, for a secret, you want to be much more proactive than for authentication, which you just can roll over into a system. So people need to start thinking about this. I think certainly we should implement the algorithms that are in NIST standards. They've gone through considerable testing. I mean, the questioner asked, how much time should the community wait? There's no real single answer there. It depends. It's often a matter of how you feel. But at this point, these are standards, and I think we should implement them. So I'm a fan of those.
I think lifting the bar from 128 up to 256 is obviously one thing that we need to do. The industry.
I mean, and those are easy, but that does require a change. For any system. I mean, it's an easy math change, but it's a different algorithm, and there are incompatibilities, and there's version control. There's all the it's sort of everything involved in making that work.
Yeah, 3DES seems to be a particular problem in finance. I think there's still a lot of cards that still have 3DES on them, and that's only 112-bit security. And
right. And the question is who's attacking it and what, I mean, those are all sort of ancient standards.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so we've got another question there.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few questions in there. A few that are sort of not based cryptography. I want to save those, and I really want to talk about social media and disinformation. So the question about quantum cryptography. Let me read it. Okay, it's a question by Simone. I'm not sure I understand the question, so you might want to unmute yourself and ask it in voice.
Who's that? Sorry.
Simone.
Simone? Simone?
Yeah, if you're there and want to unmute. You're asking about quantum cryptography and elections, and I'm not sure how they interact. So if you want to either ask it again on text or pop in.
Nope.
And there's a question about DLT, and I'd like to know what DLT stands for. Sorry.
Distributed ledger technology.
Digital what?
Distributed ledger technology.
Oh, it's another blockchain thing. Yes. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough. Right. I mean, the blockchain stuff is so security is so bad that it wouldn't surprise me that it has that kind of opportunity to go back and crack it with a quantum computer. But right, the details are complicated. Sorting about forking and consent. So I mean, which in the end, of course, breaks the whole point of it. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. This is Grant's question, so I don't know the details. It wouldn't surprise me, right? It is. I mean, in general, if you're using a blockchain, your system is less secure than without it. But the details of those new insecurities that are introduced by the blockchain depend a lot on the system. It's pretty much never the case that it makes it better, but it makes it worse in different ways depending on what you're doing.
I think there's a question on what piqued your interest in cryptography. Where did you start?
I saw that. I'm reading around. All right, let me tackle the Gen AI, Amanda's Gen AI question, because I think this is interesting because it's really not a technical problem. So the question's about using Gen AI to implement disinformation and how could you mitigate this form of election interference? So it's questions about propaganda, which is, been around, like, we've seen examples in Roman times, chiseled on walls in ruined cities. And so which will let you know that mitigating propaganda is really hard and probably impossible. And, whether it is AI generated or human generated or, any combination generated, I think it's the same thing. I'm not particularly concerned differently whether a video is created by an AI or actors on a soundstage. Some countries have more stringent truth in political advertising laws, but they're often really hard to enforce because these are contested positions. Right? There's not necessarily one ground truth in a lot of political arguments. And also a lot of political speech, especially now, the factual content is less relevant than the social signaling of whatever the meme is, and it's shared because it's how we show we're in the same team, and not because we believe it's true or not. So I am, not optimistic about any. We haven't solved this in the past. In our countries in the past bunch of 100 years, we're not going to solve it today. If anything, the ease of creating fake audio and video, I think gives at least younger generations a much more savvy intuition on how to consume this media. And so I worry more about, older people who are more set in, the previous idea that that photoshopping was hard and not that it's easy. A lot of people study this, how this works. I'm not one of them. So I sort of urge looking there, but this is not a tech problem. Right? It's not a problem you can solve with watermarking. It's not a problem you can solve by, trying to ban the use. I think it's much more pervasive because it's the basic idea has been around for thousands of years. There's a question about decentralized social media. I'm a big fan of these decentralized systems. Whether it's email or RSS feeds or decentralized social media, I think there's a lot of benefit in the power reduction of not having a single company in charge of these things, having it all be federated, and there's no reason why it can't be. There's no reason why you can't have a reader that can aggregate from 2, 3, 5, 10, 100 different social media sites. The reason is that all of those companies prohibit adversarial interoperability, and so that is something for for us to try to advocate for it. Again, this is not a tech problem. This is a social problem, right? This is companies trying to protect their business models, their monopolies, by preventing competitors from building compatible readers. Question asked, but any thoughts on SHA-256? I want to say not really, but I'm curious if Grant wants to unmute and ask the question, what you mean by that, what in particular. I think it's a fine algorithm.
Online?
But
it's SHA-3. So SHA-3
that is
like
SHA-3, yes.
CAPTCHA.
Yeah, I mean it's it's fine. And then this was another example of NIST holding a cryptography competition and choosing a really strong algorithm from a really strong field of contenders.
Ah, we
So
got Grant. We got Grant
yeah,
there.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for taking my question. Bruce, what I was asking about, we are using SHA-3 256 as one of the encryption technologies in our crypto library for the use of digital cash. And in the sense that we're using it to hash a whole bunch of multi-tokens, similar to a cash model, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, all the rest of that. And the whole system validates those hashes, those tokens, and your thought of using that and other cryptos that we have built in there in terms of security and everything else.
yeah. So it's hard. I mean, certainly it's a good primitive, and I'm glad you're using like a known standard. But what you're describing is something complex, and the devil's in the details.
Yep.
So I wouldn't sit here and tell you that's a great protocol. You'd want to have someone stare at it for a long time who knows what they're doing.
Yep.
But that feels like the right intuition. But I mean, small details matter a lot here, and you sort of know this if you look
Completely.
at
I
all these
agree.
protocols, try to break them.
Yeah, and encryption is only one small piece of the whole
Of course, right.
system and
And remember,
process and everything
SHA
else.
is a hash function, not an encryption function. So SHA is actually not doing any encryption at all.
Correct.
So, but sure, yes.
That's
But
it.
yeah, but you can use the model that SHA-3 uses. You can use it to encrypt. So
You
the
can, you're right. I
encrypt.
mean, all of these functions are one-way functions that you can build a cipher out of. So
Correct.
yes, right. I mean, you can build a cipher out of the SHA-3 mathematics. That is, I don't believe it's a standard anywhere.
That's a sponge function.
Right, right, yeah, right. So this,
With a
but
state.
the sponge function is sort of designed to take a lot of entropy in and then send randomness out. But there's a way to use it in a reversible way that turns it into an encryption. Right? Remember, hash function only goes from source to destination.
Yep.
Encryption function has to go from plain text to ciphertext and then back again. So
Correct.
that additional requirement means the math has to be different. But you can use the same mathematical primitives, right? So that blob that is the sponge function of Ketchek, can be used to make SHA-3, and you can also build a encryption function on it. And then when those first papers came out, the authors talked about that.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's strange when you look at Blake. Blake didn't win. Blake was second or third, and it didn't become standard. Now Blake is blisteringly fast, and much faster. Blake 3 so much faster than SHA-3. It's almost like we've fossilized on a standard.
Yeah, it's interesting that the algorithms are almost designed for particular architectures. You go back to the 70s, DES was designed to be fast in hardware. When you put it on a CPU, it was terrible. And then we had algorithms that were designed for 32-bit CPUs. Really, AES is optimized for a 32-bit CPU, which seems kind of silly today, but it's what we have. And some of these new algorithms are designed for faster CPUs or to make use of some of the different speeds that are built into the CPUs. So yes, it's you always design an algorithm for a particular type of architecture, and they tend to be efficient on that. And then you move to a different type of architecture, and the efficiencies are lost, and they can be not as good. And Blake's a good example of an algorithm that's become more efficient as hardware has improved. So a really clever way it's designed. So I think it's worth looking at.
And you were very close to
Thank you
getting
very much.
standard. Yeah, for AES. I remember, I think it was it three fish?
That was two fish, and
Fish?
so right, in AES there were like 3 rounds of elimination, and there were 6 in the final round, the final selection, and Two Fish was one of them.
Oh.
And yes, so we came close.
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate. So a few more questions have come in.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer the
Copilot.
person who has Flynn, who asked about employment in the cybersecurity sector. You know, if you read, short answer is I don't know the details, but if you read anything about employment in cybersecurity, it'll talk about the cybersecurity skills gap, that there's hundreds of thousands of unfilled positions. So it should be that there's no problem finding a job in cybersecurity. I'm not sure how that's on the one hand true and on the other hand not, because I think there still is sometimes a struggle, but I do feel like there are a lot of positions out there. An interesting question to ask is, how is AI going to affect that in the coming years? And it seems pretty clear that artificial intelligence systems are going to do a lot of the busy work in cybersecurity. You know, whether it's patching or looking at vulnerabilities or reading audit logs, writing reports. I mean, those things will get automated, and I think which frees up the humans to do a lot of the more complicated cognitive tasks, the kind of things that we always want to be able to, but never have time because we're always putting out the cybersecurity fire from yesterday. So I mean, there's a lot of different specialties. I mean, Flynn asked about pen testing. That's certainly one of them. But I mean, I still think there's a lot of demand out there because these skills are not there. Cybersecurity skills are specialized in sort of interesting ways that normal computer science doesn't provide because it's that adversarial nature. That is not just about making something work. It's about making it work in an adversarial environment.
I think there was a case recently where a cryptography developer, I'm sure it was Telegram, and he had traveled to France, I think it was. I think he was probably involved in some mixer implementation, like these scrambler circuits that you have with Bitcoin. But he got arrested.
Yeah, I don't know the details of that. I mean, that has something to do with Telegram and the French courts, and I did not follow that at all.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes.
But it's obviously quite worrying that someone who creates software could actually be arrested, even though the bad people are doing things with it.
They're bad people creating software. And the people who wrote the cheat software into Volkswagens got arrested. So we need to hold people responsible for the things they do. That includes software they write. So on the one hand, that's a lot, but on the other hand, maybe that's not a bad idea. In the United States, the CISO of, God, I'm blanking on the company name. Was it Uber? I think it was Uber.
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Was convicted for basically dealing with cyber criminals in a way that was illegal. Now, one that's a problem for your career, but on the other hand, maybe the person deserved it. So I would think twice before judging that without knowing the details. Someone asked about the integration of AI Copilot into business. Copilot is the Microsoft AI. I'm sure it has lots of value. I don't use it. And the question is, do you think we're too late to put effective data governance in place? That seems unlikely. Like from now until the end of our species, we cannot govern AI because we're too late. That doesn't seem right. I think it is never too late to put governance in place. And if it requires changing things, then we do that. We've done that many times through the history of our species, and we'll do it again here. Industry will like to tell you, of course, it's too late because that's what they want. But no, that feels wrong. The question from a string of numbers asking about if AI becomes more common, do you think we keep a good balance between privacy and security? the assumption of that question is that privacy and security are a balance, and I think they are both on the same side, right? You get security through privacy, and you get privacy through security. So, right, more privacy equals more security. And you're right that AI potentially can threaten both of them, or potentially can improve both of them. I mean, the AI as a power enhancing tool could be used in both ways. So if that string of digits wants to unmute and ask the question more directly, I'll have to answer it. But I just don't see I don't see a balance in the first place. And AI, like any of these technologies, are going to be used by attackers and defenders. And of course, attacker and defender, it depends on who you are and sort of non-technical things, right? The attacker could be the police and the defender could be criminals, and the attacker could be an Italian government and the defender could be a dissident or a reporter, right? So it is certainly complicated there, and AI will complicate all of that in ways I don't think we fully understand yet. So a question by KM about Homeland Security in the state, and I'm not sure I understand it. It's about government reading encrypted data, right? I mean, we generally as cryptographers think that is a bad idea because I can't limit the capability to the government. So I know the story that there was a lawful access channel in the United States that for telecommunications required by a 1996 law, and that capability was hacked by the Chinese. That came out about a month ago, and just one example of you build a backdoor for the use by the good guys, and then others use it as well. So this is why I tend to want that capability not there at all, because that ensures that the systems are actually secure. Someone's asking about try common word lists to guess passwords, and of course the answer is yes. Right? This is not an old attack, right? And you just try all the passwords until you get the right one. This is how devices are broken into in general. That the password guessing systems are commercial products. Now, how do you prevent that? I mean, it's kind of obvious. You limit the amount of guesses you can make. This phone, I think after 10 or 15 incorrect password guesses, it doesn't seize up, but it slows down. You can only guess one more every 10 minutes or so, right? So that means any password guessing, is just not going to be feasible, because the whole goal is you try it as fast as you can. There are systems that allow for offline password guessing. So if I have a blob, an encrypted blob that's protected by a password, I can try them as fast as I can until I get to the right one. And those are things that they're only commercial products for. I've seen like mechanical devices that will try to break into phones by tapping the pins one after the other. And those you try to defeat through these slowdowns. You can configure an iPhone, I think an Android too, to after so many password guesses to lock up completely. Most people don't configure that option. It feels risky, but that option is available. Let's see what else we I've been bouncing around on the question list, so I have to go up and down. Not going to talk about alien disclosure. There's another AI question about, and it's a question, I mean, I don't even know how to answer, but I think it's a lot of people think about, what are the human skills that AI can't provide? The answer to that is changing every year. Things are moving so fast, that we used to think that certain cognitive tasks would never be done by AIs, and now they are. Right now the issue is accuracy. And it's an interesting security question. We are used to systems that make mistakes. Humans make mistakes. We've always made mistakes, and when we design human systems, we design them to deal with the mistakes humans make. If you hire an assistant and you figure out how good they are and what tasks you can give them, and you have audits and you just like appeals. We think of all the processes we have in place to deal with human systems that are fallible, that make mistakes. And to the extent that an AI makes a mistake in the same way a human does, the systems will still work. There's no problem. Where it gets more difficult is when AIs make different sorts of mistakes. Let's talk about generative AI, like making up stuff. We call those hallucinations. If you talk to another human, they will get things wrong, but they tend to get them. You think about, they have a sphere of knowledge. They tend to make mistakes at the edges of that sphere. And those mistakes are often accompanied by ignorance, by statements of, I don't know. And you get a feel for a person and sort of what they know and what they don't know. Gen AI doesn't make mistakes in that way, right? They make mistakes randomly throughout the knowledge space, and they are supremely confident at all times. So that's why an AI mistake is hard to deal with, because it's not a human sort of mistake. Now, sort of, two solutions present themselves here. One is to get the AIs to make more human-like mistakes, and there's research there. And the other is to build systems to deal with AI-style mistakes, and there's research there. But that, to me, is going to be the barrier in replacing any human with an AI, is how to deal with the different sorts of mistakes the AI makes than the human makes. And, I don't think we know. There's an article in New York Times a few days ago about AIs being used for medical diagnosis. And the gist of the article was that they had three conditions. They had humans making a diagnosis, AI making a diagnosis, and then the human plus the AI. And the humans were medical experts, not random humans. And the article said that the AI alone was best, but it didn't, and I couldn't find the paper. I think it depends a lot on how you design that human AI system, right? You can design it to get the worst of both, or you design to get the best of both. And a bad way to design it is the AI makes a recommendation and the human types okay. And there the human is just rubber stamping a computer recommendation. And we just know that, we know how that fails. Better is where the AI produces an analysis and then the human is able to look at it and then draw conclusions from it. Or the AI gives us several options. There's a lot being done in that kind of design, how to design an AI expert assistant in a way that empowers a human rather than disempowers them. So while it was a research result we saw, it was hard to know how to take it without really understanding how the human AI system was constituted. And I expect there'll be a lot of work in that in the coming years. All right. Question from Isaac, and it's a few questions. It's really about the future of the internet, and what is going to be done to protect security. I mean, I see this very much as a political question, and you sort of said it yourself about the U.S. and Europe moving towards more monitored use of the internet. I mean, already the internet is incredibly monitored. I mean, anything you're doing on Facebook, on TikTok, on Twitter is monitored, right? I mean, companies are monitoring it to sell you stuff. You have a Gmail account. your email is monitored. You're using a Google Doc, it's monitored. So the internet is very much built on surveillance, on commercial surveillance. And, we know that governments, use that data all the time. So, I'm, fixing that to me are changes in law that, and the EU is moving a little bit in this direction with GDPR and limiting the amount of monitoring that can be done. But until the US changes law to make these sorts of business models illegal, you're going to see surveillance as what happens. And nothing you do on the internet is not surveilled. So I'm not optimistic there in the near term. So the question about a good question from, I think it's Elias on cybersecurity fatigue. I mean, I think this is a much more general question than cybersecurity. But yes, we see that in data breaches. I mean, there are just so many of them so often that people ignore them. We will see that in updates, that you have so many to do and you can't do them. Here's something where maybe an automation can help, whether it's AI or otherwise, to automate some of these processes. Certainly in the policy area, the fatigue is real. We've thought for a while that this breach or that breach would be the one that would force the legislation, and none of them are. So I do think there definitely is a fatigue, but I think that's also true very much in general in politics. So not sure. Wow, there's a question about voting that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 acronyms, but which thankfully you pull them out. Internet voting you can't make secure, so it doesn't matter what acronyms you use. Simply because you cannot trust the integrity of the object. You can, no matter how much math you're using, I have no idea if this phone is using any of the math. I just see what's on the screen and I know something is transmitted. So the problem is not the math problem. The problem is the security of the object. So whether it's a zero knowledge proof or homomorphic encryption, that's all software. My problem has nothing to do with software. So that's why none of these systems will make internet voting secure. You can do for things that don't matter. Lots of ways to do that, but for an election that matters, paper is what you need. And it's weird because that is a sort of a non-tech answer. And it's because this is the one tech problem we can't solve. If we didn't have anonymity, I can make it work, right? But because of that, because I have to break the link between the voter and that the voter is authorized and the vote, that is not a problem I can solve in software. All right, I'm getting like 5 new questions and we're running out of time, so I'm going to start looking at them more quickly. It's a question about operating system security, and more applications are requiring intrusive privileges, right? This is the CrowdStrike problem, right? That CrowdStrike had such deep access into Microsoft operating system that, I don't know if you know the story, they had an all zero update and that crashed CrowdStrike, which ended up crashing the whole computer. The answer is don't do that. I mean that is the way Microsoft is architected. The Apple architecture doesn't allow that. And, so you can build an operating system to be more resilient, where if the one application falls over, the whole computer doesn't fall over. And you don't have to give those intrusive privileges. That is really Microsoft legacy. And I mean, I think they should have designed their operating system differently, and they should fix it now. But that's hard, right? That's expensive, which is why you're not seeing it. But yes, I mean that is certainly a problem. This question about offensive cybersecurity operations, it is, that's something that's very contested. but it is having something that only governments should be allowed to do. The notion of hackback by corporate entities, I think, is a big mistake. But it is being used to good effect. Supposedly, a lot of this stuff is secret. And supposedly in the U.S., we have disrupted election interference operations through offensive operations. But it does increase the amount of risk out there. It makes escalation more likely. It is more destabilizing. But sometimes it seems like something that has to be done. But there's a lot of people write about this, the geopolitics of offensive cybersecurity operations. So I would send people there. Question asked, so we will never see electronic voting systems. Never's a big word, but you're not going to see it in your lifetime. I mean, we need some major advances in hardware security. So cryptocurrency is blockchain is a solution for looking for a problem. I think blockchain is one of the stupidest ideas ever. So cryptocurrency is a use case. It seems like a terrible idea for society. But no, and here it matters what we're talking about. Right? To me, blockchain requires three elements. It's the data structure, which is just a Merkle hash tree. It's not like anything new. It's around since the 70s. It is the write-only ledger, which is also like mid-60s technology. And it's the currency, right, that aligns incentives and makes it all work. So the data structure is and that to me that's a real definition, but blockchain's a marketing term, and you will see people who just use the data structure claim they're using a blockchain. They're just using a hash chain. I mean, those are fine, right? Digital time-stamping services from the 1980s used hash chains. So I think the data structures do have value, but that whole ecosystem is the thing that I think adds insecurity and pretty much never provides value. So the person who said is a solution looking for a problem, it's usually the way it works. You'll never see someone say, I have a problem, oh, let's use blockchain as a solution. It's all I have a blockchain and look, there's a problem that can solve. And it's often people don't understand the problem, which is why they're using it. All right, wow. So a question about a Schneier fact that I don't remember. I don't know my number. Sorry about that. So Flynn asks about AI, and it's sort of it's a general question about democratization, that how much of a threat is it when tools become broadly accessible? And you might think of this in terms of, we get asked this about nuclear weapons, right? If everyone can have a nuclear weapon, that'd be really bad, right? So a lot of the control of that technology is based on non-proliferation. I mean, we don't even want governments to have control, have the technology. The fewer people that have it, the better. That is often extraordinarily rare. Now you think of other dangerous technologies, gene editing. That's much more broadly available. I mean, CRISPRs are things that regular people can buy. So we're not going to find security through that kind of scarcity, right? Through, enforcing, limiting access to the tools, which means we have to build systems that are resilient and secure against attackers that have access to the tools and that are broadly capable. And we can do that. It's a different way of thinking about security. Cryptography, we build the system to be secure, and we assume that the attacker has all the computing power they want, all the math they want, all the source code they want, right? We assume that, and the system is secure anyway. So that's just a different way of thinking. It is harder. Like if we just say that, well, the bad guys never have access to a computer, suddenly it's really easy to build security. But, that's unrealistic. So, I think that is our fundamental job of sort of building that kind of system. All right, getting to the top of the hour, I'm going to take one last question. People are putting in images in this.
Can I
All
ask,
right,
can I ask
more
you
blockchain stuff. I'm going to ignore that.
yeah, can I ask you one last question?
All right, you can have the last
So
question.
I read your book, Secret and Lies, and it got me into cryptography. I read the work that you did on public encryption, and I could see the future clearly. Of all the books that you've written, because you've went from being very technical, you did applied cryptography, which had the source code that people could use, and you've moved to the dark side, more into engaging society and the
Right.
public. So in that spectrum of books, what was your favorite book that you wrote?
I mean, in general, when you ask an author what their favorite book is, they will always say the latest book. Especially, I think, nonfiction, because especially because that is their latest work reflects their current thinking, right? Or they're close to current thinking. So it's a question you almost never get a good answer to because of that. You know, you almost want to ask other people. The other answer you get, of course, is they're all my favorite, which is equally useless. So I don't know, right? I mean, because each time I write a book or anyone writes a book, it is, it is what they're doing at that moment. And it also reflects what's happening in society at that moment. So of course my favorite is the one I'm working on now that's not published yet, but that's that's not useful either.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for the chat.
All right, thank you. It's like all you people who stuck around. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the questions. And there were more I couldn't get to, and I
Yeah.
don't know why people are posting images. I will look at the chat more carefully after this
I
as
have
well.
a tulip. Someone has a tulip to sell. I don't know what that's got to do with, but if you could give a round of
No,
applause.
the tulip to sell is an allusion to Bitcoin going kind of crazy, and
That's
whether
it.
that is like a tulip boom. It is interesting. It's very much, I think, a reflection of mistrust in society, and it sort of shows that value is socially constructed. You know, and whether that's a piece of currency in your pocket or a Bitcoin, it has value because we say it does. Hey, it's really interesting to see how much of that is just a human construct. All right, so thank you all.
Well, thank you.
Yes, you're going to go have dinner. I'm going to go have lunch. And
Yeah, yeah,
thank
yeah. I
you.
have a lab. Okay.
All
See
right
you
then.
soon, Bruce. Hopefully
Bye-bye.
you'll come around to Edinburgh sometime again, and
I
we'll
will
see.
come again. I was there
I,
last year for the
I
Ciphers
know you were
Worldcon.
there
I'll
in
come again.
Glasgow recently, and I never caught up with you. But the next time you're in Scotland, then we'll catch up
Excellent.
and get you some whiskey.
I'm ready.